Picture this: a massive factory filled with workers forging steel, shaping boilers, and assembling machines that would shape nations. These were not just manufacturers. They were industrial empires that built the locomotives powering civilization itself. Today, we're counting down 20 famous locomotive manufacturers that no longer exist. The Hinckley Locomotive Works of Boston operated from 1841 until 1889, building some of America's earliest and most elegant steam locomotives. Founded by Holmes Hinckley, the company earned a reputation for well-crafted machines that railroad superintendents prized for reliability and distinctive appearance. The Boston Works produced approximately 1,000 locomotives over nearly 5 decades, supplying power for railroads throughout New England and the western frontier. Hinckley specialized in passenger locomotives, building sleek machines with ornate brass fittings that made station arrivals genuine events. The company's 440 Americans became favorites on lines where appearance mattered as much as performance. But here's the thing. Small independent builders faced crushing pressure as the industry consolidated in the late 19th century. Larger competitors offered lower prices through volume production that family-owned shops could not match. In 1889, Hinckley merged with other New England builders to form the New England Locomotive Works, which lasted only 2 years before being absorbed into larger operations. The Hinckley name disappeared, but its legacy of craftsmanship influenced American locomotive design for generations afterward. The Manchester Locomotive Works operated in Manchester, New Hampshire from 1854 until absorption into the American Locomotive Company in 1901. Founded by the Amoskeag Manufacturing Company, which dominated textile production in the region, the works applied a precision manufacturing philosophy to building steam locomotives. The company built approximately 1,500 locomotives over nearly half a century, supplying power to railroads across the northeastern United States and Canada. Manchester engines earned a reputation for solid construction and reliable performance. The works employed hundreds of skilled machinists who took pride in their craftsmanship, building each locomotive with care normally reserved for fine machinery. But here is the thing: Manchester's strength became its weakness. The company remained dedicated to traditional construction, while larger competitors embraced mass production. When the 1901 consolidation created ALCO from 8 smaller builders, Manchester's specialized workforce found their skills devalued. The New Hampshire works continued briefly under ALCO management before operations shifted to Schenectady. Today, the Manchester site hosts commercial development, its industrial heritage largely forgotten. The Mason Machine Works of Taunton, Massachusetts built some of the most innovative locomotives in American history between 1853 and 1889. William Mason brought an engineer's curiosity and an artist's eye to locomotive design, creating machines that looked as revolutionary as they performed. Mason pioneered the bogie locomotive by placing drive wheels on a flexible truck rather than rigidly attached to the frame. This allowed locomotives to navigate tighter curves while distributing weight evenly. The company produced approximately 700 locomotives, many featuring distinctive elements that made Mason locomotives instantly recognizable. The elegant curves of Mason locomotives influenced designers for decades, proving industrial machinery could possess genuine beauty. But here's where it gets interesting. Mason refused to compromise his vision for mass production economics. Each locomotive remained essentially custom-built, which delighted customers but limited output. When William Mason died in 1883, the company struggled without his guiding vision. The works closed in 1889, unable to compete with larger builders willing to sacrifice artistry for efficiency. Mason locomotives became collector's items, with surviving examples displaying astonishing craft. The Cook Locomotive and Machine Works operated in Paterson, New Jersey, blocks away from rival Rogers Locomotive Works. Founded in 1852 by John Cook, the company spent 4 decades building reliable steam locomotives for railroads across America. Unlike competitors who chased innovation, Cook focused on solid, dependable machines that railroad superintendents trusted. The company's 440 Americans and 280 consolidations became backbone power for dozens of regional railroads. By the 1880s, Cook employed over 800 workers and produced approximately 100 locomotives annually. The works sprawled across several city blocks, powered by the same waterfalls that drove Patterson's famous textile mills. But here's the thing. Being merely competent proved insufficient when industry consolidation swept through American manufacturing. In 1901, Cook became one of 8 companies absorbed into the newly formed American Locomotive Company, known as ALCO. The Patterson Works continued producing locomotives under the ALCO banner until 1926, when operations consolidated at Schenectady. Cook built approximately 3,000 locomotives, solid machines that helped build America's railroad network even if they never achieved fame. The Brooks Locomotive Works of Dunkirk, New York rose from humble beginnings to become one of America's premier locomotive builders. Founded in 1869 by Horatio Brooks, the company initially struggled against established competitors with decades of experience. But Brooks had location working for him. Dunkirk sat alongside Lake Erie, with excellent railroad connections that made shipping completed locomotives anywhere easy. By the 1880s, Brooks had established a reputation for building well-engineered machines that performed as advertised. The company became famous for passenger locomotives, with railroads coast to coast ordering Brooks power for flagship trains. The Erie Railroad, headquartered nearby, became a loyal customer and purchased hundreds of locomotives over decades. At its peak, Brooks employed over 2,000 workers and produced approximately 300 locomotives annually. The engineering department constantly innovated, developing improvements. Competitors quickly copied. In 1901, Brooks joined 7 other builders to form the American Locomotive Company, often called ALCO. The Dunkirk works continued until 1928, when ALCO consolidated operations at Schenectady. Brooks built approximately 4,000 locomotives, helping establish American steam power as world-class. The Canadian Locomotive Company of Kingston, Ontario, built steam and diesel locomotives for Canadian railroads from 1854 until 1969, making it one of the longest surviving North American manufacturers. The company produced approximately 3,000 locomotives over its remarkable 115-year history. The Kingston Works earned a reputation for building rugged machines capable of handling Canada's demanding climate and challenging terrain. Canadian Pacific and Canadian National relied heavily on CLC power to haul freight and passengers across the vast Dominion. During both World Wars, the company contributed significantly, building locomotives for overseas service and military equipment. The works employed thousands of Kingston residents across generations, becoming the industrial heart of the city. But here is where it gets fascinating. Unlike American builders that collapsed when steam gave way to diesel, CLC successfully transitioned to diesel locomotive production. The company built Fairbanks Morse designs under license and developed its own locomotives for the Canadian market. However, competition from larger American manufacturers eventually proved overwhelming. In 1969, the works closed, ending over a century of locomotive building in Kingston. Fairbanks Morse of Beloit, Wisconsin, entered the locomotive market in the 1940s with an engine design so unusual that railroad mechanics either loved it or despised it. The company's opposed piston diesel engine, developed for submarines during World War II, offered exceptional power density and fuel efficiency. Opposed piston engines have no cylinder heads, so pistons approaching from opposite ends must be precisely synchronized. That made them complex and unforgiving of poor maintenance. The Trainmaster, introduced in 1953, packed 2,400 horsepower into a single unit when competitors offered half that. Railroads purchased Trainmasters for their heaviest assignments, using single locomotives where competitors required pairs. But the opposed piston design demanded specialized knowledge most shops lacked, leading to reliability issues that tarnished the reputation. Fairbanks Morse never captured significant market share, building fewer than 1,500 road locomotives before exiting in 1963. Submarine engines remained successful, but railroad operations proved unsustainable against EMD and GE. Today, Fairbanks Morse locomotives remain prized by enthusiasts appreciating their distinctive sound. Dubbs and Company operated the Glasgow Locomotive Works in Polmadie, Scotland, from 1863 until 1903, building locomotives for railways across the British Empire. Founded by Henry Dubbs, a German engineer who had worked for Nielsen, the works quickly established a reputation for quality construction and innovative design. The company exported locomotives to India, South Africa, Australia, and South America, becoming one of Scotland's most successful engineering enterprises. At its peak, Dubbs employed over 2,000 workers and produced approximately 160 locomotives annually. The designs earned praise for durable performance in harsh colonial conditions, where maintenance facilities were primitive and spare parts were months away. But here, the story takes a familiar turn. Competition from American builders, particularly Baldwin, began cutting into British export markets by the late 19th century. American locomotives cost less and arrived faster, despite crossing an ocean. In 1903, Dubbs merged with two other Glasgow builders to form the North British Locomotive Company, hoping combined resources would restore competitiveness. The Queen's Park Works continued under new management, but the Dubbs name disappeared forever. Sharp, Stewart and Company of Glasgow built locomotives from 1828 until 1903, making it one of Britain's oldest locomotive manufacturers. The firm was originally founded in Manchester as Sharp, Roberts and Company. It moved to Glasgow's Atlas Works in 1888 to expand production. The company's locomotives powered railways across 5 continents, from British main lines to colonial networks in India, Africa and Australia. Sharp, Stewart earned fame for tank locomotives, compact machines ideal for industrial and suburban service where space was limited. The company's craftsmen took pride in building locomotives that combined robust construction with an elegant appearance. At its peak, the Atlas Works employed thousands of skilled workers and produced hundreds of locomotives annually. But competitive pressures affecting other British builders eventually threatened Sharp, Stewart's independence. American competitors offered lower prices, and domestic orders declined as British railways consolidated fleets. In 1903, Sharp, Stewart merged with Dubbs and Nielsen, Reed to form the North British Locomotive Company. The Atlas Works continued as part of the new combine, but the historic Sharp, Stewart identity vanished, leaving only builders' plates and preserved locomotives. Nielsen, Reed and Company operated Glasgow's Hyde Park Works from 1836 until 1903, becoming one of Scotland's most prolific locomotive builders. Founded by Walter Montgomery Nielsen, the company pioneered innovations that advanced steam locomotive design across the British Empire. The works produced thousands of locomotives for railways throughout Britain and its colonies, earning a reputation for quality that made Nielsen a preferred choice worldwide. When members of the Reed family took over management, they continued the founders' commitment to excellence while expanding export operations. The company's locomotives hauled freight across India, climbed mountain passes in South America, and crossed Australian deserts. At its peak, Nielsen, Reed employed over 3,500 workers and produced approximately 200 locomotives annually. But success bred complacency, and the company struggled to match American pricing in competitive markets. When the 1903 merger created the North British Locomotive Company, Nielsen, Reed brought the largest workforce and most extensive facilities of the combining firms. The Hyde Park Works became the primary manufacturing facility of the NBL, but the Nielsen, Reed name disappeared. The H.K. Porter Company of Pittsburgh specialized in locomotives too small for major builders to bother with. Founded in 1866, Porter carved out a niche building industrial locomotives for mines, quarries, steel mills, and logging operations. These were not glamorous machines hauling passengers across continents. They were workhorses, pushing ore cars through tunnels and dragging timber down mountainsides. Porter built approximately 8,000 locomotives over nearly a century, more than many famous builders managed. The company pioneered fireless locomotives, machines charged with steam from stationary boilers that operated safely in explosive environments where sparks meant death. Compressed air locomotives followed, powering operations where combustion was impossible. But here is what made Porter fascinating. While giants like Baldwin chased railroad contracts, Porter quietly dominated industrial markets that larger builders ignored. The company survived the transition from steam to diesel by applying the same philosophy to internal combustion. Porter diesels replaced Porter steamers in countless operations. The Pittsburgh works closed in 1950, but Porter locomotives continued working for decades in forgotten corners of American industry. The Schenectady Locomotive Works built its first locomotive in 1848 and went on to construct some of the most famous machines in American railroad history. The New York Works produced Jupiter, one of two locomotives that met at Promontory Summit in 1869 to complete the Transcontinental Railroad. That Golden Spike ceremony made Schenectady power synonymous with American expansion. The company built thousands of locomotives for railroads pushing westward, machines that hauled settlers, supplies, and dreams across the frontier. By the 1890s, Schenectady employed over 4,000 workers and ranked among America's largest locomotive builders. The engineering department pioneered innovations that competitors rushed to copy, establishing standards the industry followed for decades. But here's the thing: success attracted attention from consolidators seeking to dominate American manufacturing. In 1901, Schenectady became the cornerstone of the newly formed American Locomotive Company. The works continued under ALCO management, eventually becoming the company's sole manufacturing facility. Schenectady built ALCO locomotives until 1969, when the last American-built ALCO rolled out. The works that built Jupiter ended an era. Rogers Locomotive and Machine Works of Paterson, New Jersey, built over 6,000 locomotives between 1837 and 1905, including some of the most famous machines in American history. The company constructed the General, the locomotive stolen by Union raiders in 1862 and chased across Georgia in an episode that became Civil War legend. Rogers Power hauled trains across every major American railroad, earning a reputation for rugged reliability that railroad superintendents valued above all else. The Paterson Works pioneered manufacturing techniques that other builders copied, establishing standards for American locomotive construction. Thomas Rogers founded the company with a vision of machines built to withstand the brutal conditions of American railroading, where tracks were rough, maintenance facilities primitive, and schedules unforgiving. By the 1880s, Rogers employed over 2,000 workers and shipped locomotives worldwide. But here is where the story turns. When the 1901 consolidation created the American Locomotive Company, Rogers became just another component of the new industrial giant. The historic Paterson Works closed within years, its machinery shipped to Schenectady. The company that built the General vanished into corporate absorption. Beyer, Peacock and Company of Manchester built approximately 8,000 locomotives at its Gorton foundry between 1854 and 1966, earning fame for one of the most innovative designs in steam locomotive history. The Beyer-Garrett articulated locomotive, developed in partnership with inventor Herbert Garrett, revolutionized railroading on lines where conventional locomotives could not operate. The design placed two engine units beneath a central boiler, creating machines that could haul heavy loads around tight curves that would derail rigid frame locomotives. African railways adopted Garretts enthusiastically, using them to conquer terrain that seemed impossible for steam power. The largest Garretts weighed over 200 tons and developed power rivaling anything on rails. But here's the thing: Beyer, Peacock never successfully transitioned to diesel production. The company continued building steam locomotives into the 1950s, when most competitors had abandoned steam entirely. Orders dried up as railways worldwide dieselized. The Gorton Works struggled through the early 1960s, before closing in 1966. The company that revolutionized articulated steam power could not adapt when the era of steam ended. Montreal Locomotive Works, known as MLW, served as the American Locomotive Company's Canadian subsidiary from 1904 until 1985, outlasting its parent company by 16 years. The Montreal Works built thousands of steam and diesel locomotives for Canadian railways, adapting American designs for the demanding conditions north of the border. Canadian winters tested locomotives mercilessly, with temperatures dropping so low that metal became brittle and lubricants froze solid. MLW engineers developed modifications that kept power running when imported. American locomotives failed. The company built its own diesel designs after ALCO's 1969 collapse, continuing production under Bombardier ownership. MLW locomotives powered Canadian National and Canadian Pacific through the transition from steam to diesel, providing reliable service across the vast Canadian landscape. But here's where it gets interesting. Even after becoming part of Bombardier, MLW struggled against competition from EMD and GE. The Montreal Works produced its last locomotive in 1985, ending over 80 years of locomotive manufacturing in the city. Today, MLW locomotives remain in service across Canada, a testament to engineering that prioritized durability above all else. The North British Locomotive Company of Glasgow formed in 1903 from the merger of three Scottish builders, creating what briefly became the largest locomotive manufacturer in Europe. The combined works employed over 8,000 workers and could produce nearly 500 locomotives each year. The company supplied power to railways across the British Empire, from African bush lines to Indian trunk routes. Its locomotives hauled freight and passengers on 5 continents, earning Scotland recognition as a world centre of locomotive engineering. During both World War I and World War II, the company contributed significantly to the Allied effort, building locomotives for military railways and producing armaments. But here is the thing. The company never successfully transitioned from steam to diesel power. Its diesel locomotives developed a reputation for unreliability that damaged customer confidence. Orders declined as railways chose American or German diesel builders instead. By the late 1950s, the company was hemorrhaging money. Liquidation came in 1962, ending Glasgow's century-long dominance in locomotive manufacturing. The works that once employed thousands closed, leaving only preserved locomotives to remember Scotland's industrial glory. Lima Locomotive Works of Lima, Ohio, revolutionized steam locomotive design in the 1920s with innovations that squeezed more power from steam than anyone thought possible. The company's Superpower concept, introduced with the 284 Berkshire type in 1925, showed that larger fireboxes and better steam flow could dramatically increase locomotive performance. Railroads that adopted Lima designs found their freight capacity increasing substantially without adding locomotives. The engineering department, led by William Woodard, transformed American railroading by proving steam still had untapped potential. Lima built approximately 7,750 locomotives over its history, fewer than competitors, but including some of the most influential designs ever created. The company's reputation for innovation attracted orders from railroads seeking competitive advantage. But here is where the story turns tragic. Lima attempted diesel production too late and with insufficient resources. The company merged with Hamilton in 1947, then with Baldwin in 1951, forming Baldwin Lima Hamilton. The combined company could not compete with EMD and GE. Lima's revolutionary contributions to steam power could not save it from diesel's dominance. The American Locomotive Company formed in 1901 from the merger of 8 smaller builders, creating an industrial giant intended to dominate American locomotive manufacturing. ALCO built approximately 75,000 locomotives over its history, second only to Baldwin in total production. The Schenectady Works became ALCO's primary facility, producing everything from switching engines to the largest articulated locomotives ever built. ALCO power hauled freight and passengers on virtually every American railroad, setting speed records and moving the commerce that built the nation. The company pioneered diesel-electric technology, partnering with General Electric to produce some of the first successful diesel locomotives in America. However, ALCO could not match the marketing prowess or manufacturing efficiency of EMD. Despite building excellent locomotives, ALCO steadily lost market share through the 1950s and the 1960s. The company sold its locomotive designs to Montreal Locomotive Works in 1969 and exited the business entirely. The works that had employed tens of thousands closed, ending an era of American industrial might that had lasted nearly 7 decades. Vulcan Iron Works of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, spent over a century building locomotives for industries that larger manufacturers ignored. Founded in 1849, Vulcan specialized in small industrial locomotives for mines, quarries, construction sites, and plantations. The company built approximately 6,000 locomotives, sturdy machines designed for brutal working conditions where maintenance was minimal and expectations were maximum. Vulcan locomotives hauled coal from Pennsylvania mines, sugarcane across Caribbean plantations, and construction materials at building sites worldwide. The company developed expertise in narrow-gauge locomotives, building machines for track gauges so small that standard builders would not bother. But here is where Vulcan's story differs from competitors. The company successfully transitioned from steam to diesel, building internal combustion locomotives alongside steamers through the mid-20th century. Vulcan survived longer than many famous builders, finally closing in 1954 after over a century of continuous operation. The Wilkes-Barre Works outlasted Baldwin, Lima, and most other American builders, proving that serving overlooked markets could sustain a manufacturer when giants fell. Baldwin Locomotive Works of Philadelphia built more locomotives than any other company in history. From 1831 until 1956, Baldwin produced approximately 70,000 locomotives, machines that hauled freight and passengers across 6 continents. The Eddystone Works outside Philadelphia sprawled across 600 acres, employing over 20,000 workers at peak production during World War II. Baldwin Power opened the American West, connected continents, and won wars. The company's engineers pioneered innovations that competitors copied for decades. But here's the thing about Baldwin's dominance. It bred complacency that proved fatal. When diesel locomotives began replacing steam in the 1940s, Baldwin's management dismissed them as a fad. The company that had built locomotives for over a century couldn't imagine a world where steam didn't rule. Baldwin's diesel designs never matched EMD or GE products in reliability. Orders evaporated as railroads abandoned steam. The company merged with Lima Hamilton in 1951, desperately seeking survival. It didn't work. Baldwin built its last locomotive in 1956, ending 125 years of production. The greatest locomotive builder couldn't survive the technology it refused to embrace. And that's all, folks. These 20 manufacturers shaped railroad history before vanishing into memory. Do not forget to subscribe so you do not miss future updates. Here is another video I have specially selected for you. See you next time.